Good morning, everybody. Welcome all. My name is Chris Martin, CEO of the Sales and Technology Cluster. I'm luckily don't have a speaking part today because we're being hosted by Hexagon. So I'm now going to head over to Tim, who's going to run the meeting from here. So enjoy.
Morning all. Hi, my name is Tim Gears. I'm a Business Development Manager for Hexagon Metrology Limited. Welcome to this morning. It's a very interesting topic for me personally, and also for us as a company right now, and that's sustainability. So I've got some brilliant speakers this morning. The first speaker you're going to hear from today is Christina Pace. She works for a company, E-Innovation Consulting. Christina will be providing insight in how to make sustainability a key performance measure and how your business will benefit as a result. Second speaker is Richard. Richard Newhouse. He's Sales Director for Status Metrology, who we have a long-standing partnership with ourselves. Richard will be talking about driving sustainability through their work in CMM, that's coordinate measurement machines, through retrofits and through upgrades. Basically, apologies for this, Richard, but trying to get something existing, trying to get the best out of it, to be honest with you, rather than looking at replacing it, which is very appropriate, especially for sustainability. Third speaker is not really a speaker, that will be through video, and that is Mike White. He's for a company called Smith and Woolwork. Fourth speaker is Dr. Hamlet Perez, and she will be online. She works for Midlands Aerospace Alliance. They'll be providing insight on how there is funding available for companies, and that would be well worth a listen because there is a lot of funding out there at this moment in time. So she'll show you a way of how to get access to that funding. And finally, fifth speaker, get to that sheet now, is Paul Kerham from Altair UK. Paul will be detailing their work with vortex blades and how they managed to gain efficiency through effective simulation. And I looked at the website for the weekend, and that looks very, very interesting. So I'll hand you over to There'll be an opportunity as well for questions at the end of each talk. So please don't, and it's only us in this room today, so please ask them questions as well. If not, I'm sure I can come up with a couple.
I think there will be some time for questions. It's not a very long presentation.
Okay.
So I'll give you a bit of introduction about myself. So I'm an engineer by background, so we all pretty disciplined when I describe it. So I did my study in Italy, Bologna University, and then I spent about 20 years in motorsport. So that's my background. I worked with FIA for a number of years. I had the F1 technical department, racing around the world with F1. I got a bit bored at some point, so I decided that I was going to go to Williams F1 to set up Williams Advanced Engineering, and that was back in 2011. So I was in charge of the strategy, but also about the transferring of technology to other sectors in Williams. In 2012, I was allocated to the Formula E project, the Formula E battery. And then when that project was finished, after almost the end of the first race of the first season of Formula E, I decided I wanted to do a PhD in sustainability and strategy management. That was back in 2015. The reality because motorsport has got sustainability potential, but nobody really knows about it, and can do a lot to showcase that. But how motorsport fit with sustainability was very cloudy at that time, so I had to go and do a PhD and try to see what energy, automotive, and other sectors have done, so that I could actually come back to motorsport and implement it. We work mainly with motorsport company, but we do as well advanced engineering company. And of course, I'm very familiar with like design, simulation, and metrology because through my career, I've been using them a lot, and they've really got an important role in this transition to sustainability at the moment. So I'll give you a bit of overview about my company. my company is actually driving sustainability forward for motorsport. So that is our strapline, I would say. So it's quite a new company. We only existed since the end of 2018, but we really have clear momentum from this year. So we are a small purpose-driven sustainability company that can do strategy management and sustainability strategy for the motorsport sector, but also for the automotives and for the high-performance one. Our mission is to drive positive change. We think that motorsport and advanced engineering has got a place in this for transfer of technology, but as well as platform to showcase what is possible. And then we use what is called in the language the ESG framework, the environmental, social, and governance. So it's not just green, it's not just environmental, it's also the social part that possibly most of you know as CSR, the corporate social responsibility kind of language that exists since many years. So that's what we are. This is a bit of the services we provide. We do impact assessment for companies, like we come in and say to them what they do good, what they could do better, how they could improve. We do sustainability strategy and change management. One of our clients, for example, is William F1. I'm sure that everybody has seen the sustainability strategy that they've launched. We do some marketing and storytelling because it's quite important to tell the story, and we know like an engineering company are not very good in telling what they've done well. So that's what we do. We do positive engagement with the community. We've done something with the Silverstone Innovation Park on that. That was a program called Full Steam Ahead, and Hexagon was actually using the program as well. We do something with Motorsport UK with Hexagon as well. It's called the Girls on Track, trying to encourage girls to take up engineering and understand what motorsport is. So we're very focused as well on community activity. And also we're dealing with accreditation and what I call it the tick box, like that everybody needs to have for the environmental bit, and it's more and more important to see later because a lot of tender now require to have like an environmental part for a company to be able to supply or to apply the tender. And then we do quite a lot of executive education, just trying to educate the C-level of what sustainability is, what's the latest trend, and how they can harvest from that. So I think this is the most like the $100 million question. What is sustainability? So there are a lot of definitions, and the definition that we normally use is a definition that actually has been created in 1994 from the United Nations. That is a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. So it's all about the use of resource, like use the resource wisely so that the future generation can use them again. So as we said before, as Tim said before, remanufacturing, for example, upcycle, anything like that is part of the sustainability. And I think the interesting thing is that sustainability per se is not a word that is defined by the sustainable development that is defined as a word. And this is quite an important take. So when people try to define sustainability itself, it's always like a bit of wishy-washy, I would say. So, but if we actually take a sustainable development definition, it's quite key to identify like the main areas of the business that we need attention, I think. This is a bit of an idea of what does sustainability mean for companies. I think more and more sustainability is seen as a center of cost rather than profit. And the consultants charge a bit too much for doing sustainability. People don't speak the same language of consultants that do sustainability, so it takes double of the time to understand what they want. But actually, it's a great commercial opportunity. Why I'm saying that? Not because I'm a sustainability consultant, I say that as an engineer, I think once it is quite easy to do an assessment of where the company is and to find some easy win on sustainability, where the company should go. But also when the company embraces sustainability, there's got a lot of other opportunities that come up within the community, within the ecosystem that maybe not, that would not have considered before. So I always say like what initially seems a center of cost soon become a center of profit for companies. So also it's vital at the moment for the survival of companies that they actually embrace the journey on sustainability. I think we will see the slide after, but it's like COP26 was really important for the UK because it was when the government has put quite a lot of emphasis on what small and medium enterprises should do to try to embrace sustainability. And I'll give you in the slide later a bit of guidelines or website of toolkits that company can use, and they're free to use it. It's not that you have to pay for that toolkits, and they're actually really good to understand where you are with sustainability and where you want to go. And why I'm saying that is vital for the survival of company is because more and more big companies are accountable for their carbon footprint. That means that as a supplier, you will have to unveil or declare your carbon footprint to these big companies, to the company that you supply for. And if you don't have that things in place, they will start to turn down suppliers. And we see that in motorsport, we are already seeing that. For example, with the tenders, the FIA has put in the tenders lots of strict rules about life cycle assessment and carbon footprint. And if company cannot fulfill that, they normally don't even being considered for tender. So we see lots of high, like advanced engineering companies come to us and say, oh, could you put X, Y, and Z together because there is a new tender for the ECU, there is a new tender for the Formula E cars. So, and we see that that is a common practice as well on government tenders. So if you want to bid anything that is related to aerospace, and we lately saw something else in the shipping sector. That is also where we need some kind of environmental credentials to apply for that tender. Also, one of the things that we need to, we normally tend to stress the companies like most of the companies in the last 20 years had these corporate social responsibility programs. And that is good. That is part of sustainability. It's the S in the SG, so it's the social part. So that can be easily turned around to actually make up for part of the environment or the sustainability strategy of a company. So it's not that I would always say the language has changed, but things that have happened can be easily reused and reconfigured to try to facilitate companies to start the journey on sustainability. We normally tend to use the ESG framework, the environmental, social, and governance framework. Not because I think some of the other people use profit, planet, and people framework, but we have seen that the ESG is the most using the financial kind of sector, and that is kind of helpful when you speak with bankers or when you speak with financial entity for them to understand where you are. Profit, people, planet is good as well, and it's very aligned to the ESG. It's just very, I think, academical as a framework. That's why we don't tend to use it. But yeah, that is the main framework we have seen coming out with companies, and we encourage companies to embrace. Now, we all know about COP26, the big meeting in Glasgow in November. The obviously was showcased all over the news, so you couldn't miss it. And there were a lot of things, good and bad, coming up. I think the good things for small and medium enterprises is the number of tools, free tools that were created that you can actually use to start your journey. So you don't, I wouldn't say you don't need a consultant, but it's kind of like you can start your journey internally and see where you are through a number of tools. The most useful one was the SME Climate Hub. That is, you got a website there, and that's actually part of the Race to Zero campaign on the government, and it's trying to align all the SME to net zero by 2050. So it looks like a lot of time away, 2050, but it will come around pretty quickly, and especially if you are a small medium enterprise with not too many resources to use it for sustainability, it's quite good to get on board early so that you can plan your journey. The app is really good, it's really clear, so it's kind of like if anybody wants to have a look, I think it's been done very well. The other thing that has been put in place is the business ambition for 1.5 is called. So that is a partnership with the UN Global Compact. That is the United Nations part that look after enterprise. That is possibly not really for SME, it's more for bigger companies. As we know, endings from the United Nations in terms of toolkits don't come for free, unfortunately. So it's kind of like they come to a cost. But again, it's like we have seen lots of companies embracing this kind of tools and action and this kind of like about webinar to try to make people aware where they are. I would say the SME Climate Hub is more like a national coalition and toolkit. So I would suggest if you are UK-based company, it's a good thing to do. The other is more for bigger companies that are not just based in the UK, so it's more like an international kind of activity. And then there is a stakeholder toolkit that can be found in the SME Climate Hub, I think, as well. That is kind of a commitment to support the small business. The other thing that is quite interesting to see, that actually what COP26 has left behind is a sense of urgency from companies to actually be more sustainable. So because the government has gone on about the plans and about net zero by 2030, 2050, 2040, so it's kind of like different companies and different governments as well have set a very high objective from when achieving net zero. We see that more and more companies, and especially small medium enterprise, want to feel that they need to get on board to the journey. And that, in a way, is a good thing. In a way, it causes a lot of stress because the resources small and medium enterprises are not there. So, and that is bringing us to the question: is how our industry can help, how your industry, that is the simulation industry, the design industry, and the metrology industry can help with this commitment and this company to go to actually fulfill the 2050 net zero on which we put at a COP26. So this is quite an easy way to understand how our industry works at the moment and what we need to change. So we work on a linear model. We design something, we simulate something, we produce something, it's a prototype at the beginning, then we do a checklist, if the prototype works or not work, we go back and design again with all the modifications, and then we produce it. And that is what's happening. It's very linear, the process at the moment, and it's kind of like, there are some loops between one and the other, but it's kind of very linear from the design to the creation of something. And that is in any industry. It's not just in advanced engineering, it's not just in engineering, it's in fashion as well. That's what's all over the news. It's in commodity products. That's what happens. Like it's a very linear process from the design to manufacturing of it. So one of the things that COP26 has taught us is that the linear model doesn't work. So the linear model actually has got a lot of waste in between process and lots of waste at the end, because when it comes to the end is not taught with reusing and recycling in mind. So what we need to change as an industry is the way this model works. And that's where design, simulation, and metrology can actually have a big impact. So what we are looking at is what is called sustainable design. It's a more of a circular model. And the sustainable design is a process that already think about the end goal of the product and how we can reduce the negative impact on the environment. So it's like through the, for example, as you can see in the slide, there are some principles for sustainable design that are looking at the form, how that form could impact future use of the product, look at the functionality, how we use it, and how we can use it after when its end of life is finished or when it's got a second life. looking at costs, of course. So sustainability is also about financial sustainability, so it's also about cost, material, durability, and process. And the process is like when we produce something, we never think about the energy that goes into producing it. And that is quite an important thing to reach net zero, because as well that need to be renewable energy or need to be clean energy, otherwise we're going to create more footprint with creating a product. And I think the realization of that is a bit like electric cars. It's like it's a great thing. There is no CO2 coming out of the exhaust pipe, but actually a study has just showed that to produce an electric car is more carbon footprint intensive than to produce an ICE car. So it's a bit like, okay, then someone would need to do the process or the design. So this is one of the things that the industry can embrace through sustainable design and simulation and metrology. And the other two parts of this is actually simulation and metrology. So if we can put that three together, design, sustainable design, simulation and metrology, we're going to skip quite a lot of carbon footprint of the cycle, the linear cycle that we normally have. And we can have an end product that is already thought with the environment in mind, that is also account for a second life, that is remanufacturing, is reusing, is recycling, and the end of life, that is when we need to dispose of it. So how simulation and metrology can be key enabler for realizing the net zero goal. Obviously, they reduce waste. You can simulate, like if you simulate a lot, and you don't need so many prototypes. So it's kind of like that could help in that process. They align trying out new material, for example. So we all know in simulation you can change the material and the material property, so you can find your best and optimum with different materials that are less polluting compared to other materials. And that is something that we as advanced engineering are not very good. We love carbon fiber, that is highly polluting. But I think in the last year we are actually seeing that through simulation model, we can actually simulate something in natural fiber or flax, or you can use other materials that are much better for the environment and will work with some of the parts of the car that are not structural. So it's kind of that's through simulation and design that's becoming quite a normal practice about trying to find different materials. Also, as I said, it decreases the number of prototyping that you need, but also it decreases the number of errors that you, like especially with metrology, you do a prototype, you measure it, if there is anything wrong, you know already what is wrong, and then you can port it back to the design and you can adjust it. So, and then sometimes it's also quite useful to reduce the weight of components. Obviously, motorsport is obsessed with weight. So, but I think in general, the industry recognizes that if you do things right, so you're actually going to reduce the carbon footprint for shipping, you're going to reduce the carbon footprint of a car, for example, if the car is lighter, so there is quite a number of benefits to do that. So I think one of the important takeaways for the industry is the sustainable design, simulation, and metrology are becoming more and more important for this net zero goal, and your industry will possibly be stressed a bit more from the wider industry to continue this process. But what I would advise is to have this circular model in mind whenever you design, simulate, or measure any product, because it's only with this circular approach that you can really make a difference between your company and other company, and you can really make a difference as well for what is the net zero, how we're going to reach the net zero goal, and how fast we're going to reach. And that's it. Any questions?
On the, you mentioned tender subjects, so larger companies requested, well, asking for some sustainability credentials from smaller suppliers. So obviously, as you mentioned, toolkits, there are a number of materials out there. I think maybe carbon footprint is a more objective concept. You can go and actually come up with a number, but all the other things, social, impacting community, they are open for interpretation, right? So there is a wide range of things that companies, like smaller companies like mine, could go and set up a plan, but there might be different model companies. So how do you see us in coming years going in the sense of how would a larger company look down to the suppliers and evaluate what is reasonable or not? Are we going towards predation?
So we already see that because it's kind of like a lot of, I don't know if anybody worked with any of the F1 teams, is like, well, obviously Hexagon does, but you would have seen that in your onboarding supplier form, now there is a question about have you got sustainability credential and what is sustainability credential? So it's not just that way, we've seen that as well at like more granular level. And the evaluation process that most of them have put in place is the same evaluation process of the automotive industry. So if you are a supplier of OEM, you would have the same question. But if you are a small company and if you are local to them, you kind of have got an advantage because what they're trying to do is to encourage local development. So it's like they will always look at your size and where you are located compared to a bigger company in China, because one of the plans of most of the bigger companies trying to economically develop the area where they are. So in that way, they will look at that first. They will look at your diversity split. That is something that, for example, Ford does with their suppliers, especially first-tier suppliers. They will look at have you got any ISO credentials, so the 14001, and that is actually an environmental management system kind of thing, so it's not very heavy. Or in the motorsport industry, they will look at the FIA, the environmental accreditation, that is similar to an ISO, but it's not so onerous on companies to do. And then what they will look is what you're doing for the community. So sometimes they will look have you got a program for your employees to go out in school or to embrace a social activity. But I think for small and medium enterprises, not as onerous for other big enterprises, because it's kind of like you don't have to have a sustainability strategy. As long as you got an environmental statement or a sustainability statement, normally companies are fine. Possibly as we move on to 2050, that will shift as well, because what is going to be required is going to be a bit, not as lighter, but for the next 10 years, I think I wouldn't say it got easy, but it's not that difficult, I think. And for a small company, because I think it's under 50 people, because of the local economic development that they're looking at, they normally are quite happy to make amendments as long as you got a plan and some objectives that you want to fulfill, that they're okay. And coming back to your social point, like about how you evaluate the social activities, actually there is quite a lot of scales that they are used in business to evaluate some social activities. They're not really well known. I think I only knew of them because in a project that we did with the innovation part, we used one of them to measure the impact of our activity in schools. So it's kind of like we actually got to know about the skills and how to use it. But I think mostly is effort versus impact. So and that is what they're looking at. Obviously, if you're a small company, they're not expecting as much from a big company. But if you do effort versus impact, is normally quite a good indicator of where each company is in that scale.
Hi Christiana, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
So, banker in the room, so excuse any non-technical questions that come out, but I've known Christiana for a while. I think I just come to these events once to learn more and more about it, and this whole sustainability thing. I guess it's COVID, there's lots going on, but to me these events should be ran with people, because the reality is, just from a banking perspective, pretty much every case that I'm dealing with, although it's just like Robert, that is on the agenda now. We are doing environmental risk and looking at the sustainability aspect side of it. It's not going away. And I think the power of like events like this and what the cluster can do is bring these SMEs on board and understand. It doesn't matter whether it's 10 people, 50 people, 100 people. It's not going away. And it's becoming more and more on the agenda. A very naive person listening to some of the COP26 stuff. you're looking at where the opportunity is. And even if you look at what they're saying in the financial services sector, they're expecting the pension funds to de-invest from these companies, and they want their customer bases to be environmentally friendly as well. I mean, they just moved it to 2040 now for net zero on vehicles. And the supply chain networks that our clients in the supply chain networks, it's valuable for us to understand how they can utilise people like yourself and people in the room here to help them on that journey. So I mean, I think what the cluster is about at the moment is anything that we can do along with sustainability. I mean, a lot of it's the name above the door when people look at it and go, does that resonate with me? But I think, the whole sustainable thing around here in the companies, there are a lot that are negative, but I think a lot more, if they can get on that journey and get ahead of the curve, they can be extremely successful. Because the SMEs are so agile. That's what they're good at. I was talking to some of the guys a little while ago that I've got a company in injection moulding into the automotive sector, and they're literally having to reinvest in all their equipment because they've got to use different polymers now, and the machines from 10, 15 years ago are not good enough. That's a massive investment. It's an opportunity for them that from a banking perspective, we need to know we can support them. So that whole education piece, I think, brings opportunity, and the likes of the cluster of PIM and all that kind of stuff. And again, talking to, I know that what's all been built around here through the MEPC, it's all, in the main, it's all locally sourced. It's local companies building. So even, at that point, some of it's very simplistic. I mean, I know the projects you've involved, I've known you for long enough, but I mean, to be able to access people like yourself, for an SME to have that conversation or pick it up afterwards, but it's massive, and I think there's a huge amount of opportunity.
Yeah. One of the things that I probably should have reviewed that, but one of the things we've been talking with team is to set up a ESG working group with the SME and with people in the cluster. So where actually people come and say what they've done good, what they need to do, and other people can share best practice. Because we realize that sustainability can be useful for an SME, but if people want to get on the sustainability journey, it shouldn't really be a cost problem, you know what I mean? It's about sharing best practice and make sure that the people in the cluster are fine and they can go to the next step. So we've been working for a while now and get some of actually the motorsport teams, the Formula E teams, that they have done accreditation and they're dealing with that day-to-day to try to buy into this group, and then it's kind of they're trying to extend it to the SME as well. So hopefully there's some good news in the new year.
You can't solve the problems by every widget you manufacture by planting a tree.
No, but
because we'll have so many trees and we have to move eventually, but that's just a simplistic view of getting around it. That's not sustainable, is it?
Someone did a really interesting map during conference about filling the whole world with trees, and not even that is enough to offset the carbon footprint that we're going to have in the next 10 years. So unless we can do it from a point of view of designing sustainability in mind, and simulating sustainability in mind, and producing sustainability in mind, we're not going to go anywhere. That's the reality.
And the other thing is all these people investing money in battery tech. If all of a sudden it switches completely to hydrogen, I'm not saying it's going, but all of a sudden someone's going to wake up and go, hang on a minute, we're missing a trick here. The only company at the LCV event over at Millbrook, X number of years has been Toyota, been doing the hydrogen side of it. All of a sudden people wake up. Then again, that puts a massive burden on the supply chain networks again and the SMEs to evolve and grow with that again. So, I mean, God only knows where it's going to go. It's going to be outside my lifetime, but I think you're right. There's huge opportunity here as a collective of individuals that we can work together to support one another.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that is why the technology transfer is good. It's we recognize the need. We recognize that could be some financial barriers to create what they need, and we act on that. So, yeah.
And just to add to that as well, if you don't mind, if I was an owner of a company, especially if it was a small, medium enterprise company, that would probably be probably the first thing I'd be thinking about right now, and that would be how can I hedge this as a company a little bit. And that sounds a little bit rude, but we're all in it at the end of the day to make money.
Well, it's a competitive advantage.
Definitely, yeah. And as business development manager for a company the size of Hexagon, that's something that I'm thinking of doing. This will be one of my top 3 goals next year. Is how can we gain a competitive edge and one of those things will be sustainability.
Yeah, and like I say, banker in a room, I want to protect my clients.
Yeah,
It's simple as that, so.
And one of the things about social, like the innovation pipeline, a program that inspiration for innovation for inspiration. I always get it. Inspiration for innovation or innovation for inspiration anyway.
Both
I
sound
call I. But it's kind of like they're running this program in local secondary schools to try to encourage kids to embrace like innovation and coming to see what job is available. That's like it's something that is run centrally, and you as a company can get involved, and you as a company can use it much as for actually saying that you're going to do something in that space, and it wouldn't cost you, except for your time, it wouldn't cost you much. So there are some really easy wins on sustainability that not many people talk about because obviously that's too easy. But it's kind of like it's really no-brainer to implement. And we see that with the motorsport company, like when we went like to William that one to mention, like they had a massive corporate social responsibility program that was live since 2011, even going to school. And we were like, why you have never spoke about that? That is a fantastic piece for the sustainability that you want to create. So it's just trying to find all that kind of things of the puzzle and collect them together to have a really good pedigree.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for that. That's fantastic. So second speaker would be yourself, Richard, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So Richard Newhouse, sales director for Status Metrology. We've been working with Hexagon Metrology. Have got a very long-standing relationship with Status. How long has it been now?
1999.
God almighty, so well before my time at Hexagon.
And
But that kind of says everything, doesn't it, really? So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Okay. Yeah, this is a really interesting concept to us because from one expert in the field, we're now moving across to complete novice, which might sound slightly scary to start talking through some slides. But the reason why I'm here is because actually we've been aware of sustainability for quite a while. What we do as a business is sustainable. I'm a sales and marketing director, so I'm very interested in the messages that we share. I'm very interested in the opportunity to make money, the opportunity not to be left behind. So I, sort of rather mockingly, would refer to Status actually as an unintentionally sustainable business. What we do is sustainable, it's the heart of what we do. But actually, it wasn't by good planning. However, we've had a sea change in our business probably latter part of last year when we were moving premises and looking what we were doing and looking at how we operate and what we do when we in business. And we realised that we needed to sort of act. But I'll be honest with you, I didn't know why we needed to act. I had no real concept. Understood sustainability was a good thing, but had no understanding of what the outcome might be if we were to do nothing and not to take some accountability, which I think is a really key message today. Obviously, global warming has defined our generation, and it's only produced by two things: human activity and human inaction. That cartoon summarises it quite nicely. It's no secret that our planet's running out of resources. In 2012, the United Nations did got 65 different estimates as to the maximum sustainable population, and they were all around about, commonly around about 8 billion, although a number of people put it down as low as 1.5. Well, back in 2004, we were running at sort of 6 point something billion people, and currently we're at 7.9 billion. It's fairly close to that 8 billion threshold, and we're going to exceed that very, very soon. So everybody has a responsibility, and I think that's the sort of message that Status has got through and through these days. What I wanted to try and do was piece together what the future might hold, and the sort of near future. So I did a little bit of research, just wanted to get my head into it, to find out what would 79 years from now, hopefully my daughters lifespan look like? And actually, these changes aren't going to come overnight. They're not going to come in 79 years' time. We're going to see this more and more. So I found some experts who I won't disclose just now. I'll share their details in a few moments. But what their predictions were pretty scary, really. I mean, summer temperatures in Paris of 111 degrees. Large parts of Australia, west coast of America, Dubai, Marrakesh will be a desert wasteland. This isn't like not in the 200 years from now. The increased surface temperature and more moisture in the air lead to tropical storms more frequently. Millions of people have been displaced by destroyed infrastructure, and that's in cities in the UK and Europe. The melting permafrost is releasing ancient microbes which humans have never been exposed to, so we've got no resistance, and mosquitoes and ticks are flourishing in a warmer, hotter environment, meaning that infections are spreading at epidemic rates. If you're unfortunate enough to be in an area quite close to the sea, you're likely to live in a house with water up to your ankles. But unfortunately, all the insurance companies have gone bankrupt, so there's no resource there to improve your situation. If you're really close to the coast, you'll find that potentially fishing as a business has crumbled away because the waters are too acidic for us to use and support. And even in public restrooms now, there's locks on water, or at very best, they're coin operated. And there is fiery conflict, between those that have great access to water and those the poor that don't. So it's not a million miles away, and this is all rather sort of sad and damning, but unfortunately the human species is now more worried about how long it will survive. Rates of suicide are predicted to be incredibly high. People are haunted by the unbearable loss, the guilt, and there is a deep resentment towards our generation for not doing enough to prevent this catastrophe from happening. Now, I'd love to say that is a plot line from 28 Days Later or The Waking Dead, but actually it's been put together by these two experts, Christiana Figueres and Tom Rivett-Carnac. Now, Christiana Figueres is a fascinating lady. I don't know a great deal about her. She's the daughter of the Costa Rican president. She's worked extensively within the UN framework on climate change. She was born in the 50s on the other side of the world, and she came into partnership with Tom Rivett-Carnac, who was born in the 70s. He's heir to the East Indian Company. He spent his early life with his family looking for ways and methods of extracting oil, and actually wanted to do something a little bit about that. So they were the chief advisors that negotiated the historic Paris Climate Change Agreement of 2005, which was signed by 195 countries. And their work's been published in this book, The Future We Choose. It's a fascinating read. I haven't completed it all, but I have just started. So I think what's so interesting about this is that everything they're discussing is entirely preventable, but we all need to be facing in the same direction, and we all need to take our part of ownership. So it's a well-known, unknown phrase that we don't inherit the earth, that we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, but we borrow it from our children. And I think that's true, and therefore maybe we should look to the youth and take some advice from somebody from Stockholm who's 18 years old, the famous Greta Thunberg, who has rightly accounted that no one is too small to make a difference. And I think that's hopefully why everybody's in this room today is to see what we can do. So I'm going to flash through some slides because we've had a really interesting insight into sustainability a few moments ago. So I'm not going to try and represent from an expert, but I think the understanding is important that we should take care of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to care for themselves. There are three elements to it, as we've discussed. I'm not going to bore you all to death with this, but what I do want to talk about is, and you mentioned the ESG framework, the one that I think we kind of apply in our business is the sense of the triple bottom line, which goes away from the traditional bottom line, which is finding dosh for stakeholders and making sure that their rewards are there. And actually, we sort of try and consider people, planet, and profit within our business. So what does that look like? Well, with people, it's a move away from strictly adhering to shareholder demands and focusing on shareholder groups, the employees, suppliers, and customers alike. So having a much broader, open attitude to these things. So we employ a fair hiring practice. We encourage volunteer work. And we're building strategic partnerships with non-profit organisations that share our values. And this is all sort of good stuff for next year for us to go teeth into. So it's on the horizon in a big way. When it comes to the planet, I'll come to that in a bit more detail, but we're very good with what we do. We kind of upcycle, recycle, develop our product, which means that we're not digging granite out of the ground. So we have a very strong environmental message within our business, and the product we don't use, we recycle. What I quite like about this is that when you come to the bottom line, the whole motion of looking after a very small elite and actually caring for the broader, wider community is paramount to the concept of the triple bottom line. The business world, we see it, is ready for change. 96% of CEOs believe that sustainability should be part of strategy and operations. However, 46 cite the complexity of information across functions as a significant barrier. I think that's kind of typical of business, isn't it? In that, you know, nearly everybody thinks it's a great idea, but fewer than half actually have any strategy or plan in place as to how they want to implement that. And it's not a new concept. It's Charles Darwin, that's been around when he was around, cited that it's not the strongest or the most intelligent that survive, but those that are most responsive to change. And I think right now, businesses need to be responsive to change, and they need to seriously focus on sustainability. I think the impacts of getting it wrong don't bear thinking about. Certainly in the 80s and 90s, we saw people like ExxonMobil doing climate change denial type of advertising, which clearly didn't do them any favours. And I think we need to sort of step away from those. And we've moved on, the world's moved on a lot, but understand that actually, you know, activists are really, really bad for business. What's interesting about the whole movement of activists is not only are they immediately bad for business, but history is written by the victor. And I think that there can sometimes be a perception that activists are slightly hippie or out there or a bit free thinking. But I dread to think how their activities will be regarded in 50 years' time if we're not in the place that we need to be as a planet. I would imagine that they'll be seen as unsung heroes of our generation. The greater masses miss the point. So I think, you know, the sort of threat of getting it wrong now is there and with good cause. But I don't think it's a case of just being seen to be green, and lots of companies are being seen to be green. We've got to actually jump on board with this and see if this works. So I think this is fascinating that in 2020, this was Shell's main advert.
I was very into science and maths. I love to dream about all the things that were possible. So my kids, they just think I talk to people all day. I say I work in renewable energy, and they go to me, what's that mean, Mummy? But then I talk about the solar panels you see on people's roofs, the big wind turbines you see when you're going down a motorway. I help the energy that those things produce get into people's homes. We want to bring 100% renewables to the UK grid. For me, I see the energy transition as being a hugely exciting part of the future. All of us in our homes, all of us in our small businesses may be producing our own energy. It's really important for me that I look back in 10 years' time and I see I've made the future far cleaner and far better for our children.
Kat and her team's determination is bringing increasing amounts of renewable electricity to the UK grid.
But in reality, it's less than 2% of what they do. Yet, there is a real drive to appear these days to be green. And understandably so, because companies that get sustainably right flourish. Ben & Jerry's are an incredible organisation, ice cream company, and they are dedicated to sustainability, and they built their brand around being all natural. It's their defining piece, and from a marketeer, I think that's really clever that they've ingrained it so well. As actually have Lego, which is astonishing for a company that makes plastic products, but they're pledged to be 100% renewable by 2030. The fact that their plastic products aren't disposable, they are reusable, and that although plastic's probably not a great topic, what they're doing and how they work with it is very, very clever and innovative. So what we wanted to do was look at where sustainability falls in with our business and where we think it's going to be good for us. So we believe it's good for market share. We think it helps customers remain loyal. It certainly differentiates us as a brand from our competitors. And it improves employee morale and loyalty. And we generally see the next generation coming through as having a green policy and a sustainable business. For them, it will be an absolute prerequisite. It won't be a byproduct of how much they earn and what the opportunities are with the job. It will be a mandatory. We also feel that applied correctly, it can increase efficiency and deliver productivity. It brings with it a reduction in risk as well, helping secure the supply chain for the future, avoiding negative public opinion. I'm going to talk to that activist just a few moments ago. I think that's really important that businesses these days are sustainable, so that we're not exposing ourselves and also doing the right thing for the future. And also, as you touched on, preparing for regulations and being ahead of the curve. So here's how we did it. Our office is 95% paperless. We only buy recycled paper. We recycle all our thermic cartridges. We have waste separation fees that are recycling. We encourage staff carpooling. We moved units. We moved to new premises in March of this year. Key criteria for that was that they were modern, double glazed, better insulated. We have an open plan office environment, so people are encouraged to communicate by talking, not using the phone or emailing. We run employee wellbeing events. We give our team the possibility of working from home, and we shut our computers down at night. Now, I appreciate some of this will sound incredibly basic to you guys, but actually, lots and lots of businesses are busy. Don't do it, and actually, I don't think we did some of these things up until fairly recently. Our policy around fleet has been refined and tuned, so we have a strict MPG and emission standard for all our vehicles. We manage our mileage and our fuel consumption on a weekly basis incredibly accurately. We encourage our engineers who are up and down the country to stay in hotels, and we don't penalise them for that. 5 out of our 10 vehicles are electric. If our engineers are able to, we encourage them to carpool, and all our new cars, anything required for the fleet, is either a petrol vehicle or a hybrid. Our factory is all about repurposing equipment, and I'll show you how we do that in a few moments. But wire is controllable, granite can be recycled. We're working with eco-friendly partners. We streamline our shipping, so we buy in bulk. We manage stock precisely, and we keep a good inventory of what our engineers have got, so we're reducing waste at every opportunity. Ours is a sustainable product. Thankfully, I've got a backdrop of them. But what we will do is we'll take the physical machine itself. We remove all of the old out-of-date technology, so that's computers, controllers, software, operator interfacing and probing. And we replace them with the very latest Hexagon offering. This is good for our business because it gives us a USP in the market, but it's great for our partners at Hexagon too, because it makes their product more accessible, because one of the big benefits of doing this process is reduction in cost. So we're not digging more granite out of the ground, we're extending the machine's serviceable life. We're saving a significant amount of money. The technology that we provide aligns with the showroom offering from Hexagon. It's the same choice of sensors and software. We offer a really fast turnaround because our kit is ready to go. That results in less impact on the environment. They're shipped to a very similar standard as buying new, and we provide all the same level of support that you would expect. So it comes with a warranty and an aftercare plan, just like buying new. So to wrap up my slides today, I thought I'd finish on hopefully a sort of light-hearted 11 points that we can all do. But we're all trying to implement at Status. So consuming less meat, using less energy, reducing single-use items, donating unused items, conserving water, taking a bus, walking, cycling, driving. It's a tricky one to implement when you have an office in Ilkeston and you live in Derby, but there's things for the future here. Considering how we buy products as well, shopping locally, addressing sustainability, and making sure that we use eco-friendly cleaning products are all things that we're trying to do to make a small change now. Thank you for your time today. Does anybody have any questions?
Just an observation from my point, I think, following on from Christiana's, and this is to me why I come to these events again, is to understand the correlation between what needs to be achieved and what companies can actually do. When people like yourself have gone on that journey, for us to look at it and see if we can do the same. So what would be interesting, I'm not throwing you under the bus here, Christiana, from your perspective, listening to that and what you're doing, is that kind of the stuff?
Yeah, that is the first step of implementation, and I was quite pleased because what they call environmental management system, we already got it there. So, and I think it's these problems of the terms that people that work on sustainability use that are not really linked to the terms that everybody can understand, and we're doing a lot of that, trying to explain with the easy word what like an environmental management system is really the policy that you talk about paper, that you talk about recycling. So that is the kind of things that start your journey and give you credential on that. And that's the first thing that if you do an ISO 14001, that is what you need to create, so you already got the bulk of that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, and I think that is what we notice a lot. We notice a lot about, like, people already got things there, and they already have done it. It's just that don't call it with the names that the industry like to use.
Yeah.
And if we can just make that kind of, like that translation, and then it makes it easier for people to say, okay, we've got that, so we don't have to do this, like, or we can just go to the next level. I think what you've done is really good.
I didn't mean to throw under the bus. It's just because to me, this comes back to, like I say, there's a discussion at the conference with BAE Systems coming on board. The last thing I'd want is one of my clients potentially to miss out an opportunity just because when they start doing their audit and their due diligence, that it's the wrong kind of words being used or they've missed out. So I'm thinking, like you say, it's probably easier for an SME sub 50 employees to kind of get it right, but they can get it horribly wrong if they do nothing as well. So yeah, that's a really interesting contrast between what Christiana's looking at and her background experience, and then true life SME that's out there doing this, and how you can or cannot, you can get it wrong or right. Wrong, yeah. So thank you for that.
I think for me, one of the key things which you clearly have done is that you start to consciously think about it. So whenever you do something, it's kind of like, okay, how does this work from an environmental point of view, from a sustainability point of view, how's that going to impact things? So if you're already on that journey and you then apply to, get a contract with BAE Systems or something, probably all you need to do, which is what Christiana was saying a moment ago, is tweak the language to make sure that you use the words that they want to read. But if you're already doing that, but it starts with no, we're just not making a thing here, we're making a thing, and how is that going to impact everything else that we do? And that's the most important thing that you really start with. And I think, as long as we can get all the companies to do that and everybody to start thinking in those sort of terms, then I'm sure, Christiana's and the other Christianas out there can then help you to kind of go like, okay, don't call it that, call it this, and then you'll sail through any inspections and all that sort of stuff.
Well, the challenge is, we all know, business owners are busy, and everyone wants to do the right thing, but it won't be something necessarily, it's all, once it's all plastered over the news because of COP26, they'll be looking at it, but they've got COVID to deal with. Hopefully we can put this thing to bed pretty soon. And as the world opens up again, I mean, to me, this all comes into the whole thing around reshoring capabilities and stuff as well. It's the whole big picture, isn't it, around bringing all the manufacturing back into the UK, wherever it's coming into. That all fits into that environmental aspect side of it. But when you're out there genuinely going to go out there and try and tender for a contract in any type of supply chain, it's still only going to come down to as good as what you're actually doing in that. So, I think we're in a brilliant space that we can use this as a platform to do that. And I found that really interesting, so thank you.
And everybody invited up.
And I think it's like one of the things that we've been doing this with some other company down to London is like they done a similar journey, and then you need to tender for something, and they were not aware that that would actually apply for the tender. So what we actually wanting to do is not to reinvent the wheel, it's just, okay, you got X, Y, and Z, how we can frame it so that they fit what they ask you. So, and that's what, when we say we do content marketing and storytelling, everybody's like, oh, that's greenwash. No, that is not greenwash, that is translating what you've done in practice, in the language of the people that you need to use it with. So it's a bit like, when you are a translator to translate in Italian or in French, it's the same thing, but unfortunately, like the sustainability community is becoming so picky on the language that we find that that is more and more what companies want to do. Like they already got something, they just don't use the right terms, and they're just changing that will make it fit the bill. It's a bit crazy,
and the other thing is, if you think about it as well, you can talk about it later, but again, excuse I'm representing, but I just think, you could be talking to financial institutions and banks about this, and they've got to learn about this as well. It's not as easy as an Excel spreadsheet, etc., etc. But there's a huge drive around green funding and green loans, and a lot of government backing behind it. So again, there's a lot of education across the whole part that goes with it. Again, that's the reason why myself and colleagues need to understand more about this. That when we're looking at the opportunities, how we support, that we leverage the most appropriate thing. So there's all these things being thrown about. As I'm going to hear about some from the aerospace people, but it's a shame that actually just tweaking a few things around might actually mean that you get a better opportunity to go and win a contract or some funding or whatever, and that's where collectively we can work together on
I
that.
think you hit the nail on the head. When we started to get interested in it, it wasn't about big cultural changes. It was just about little adjustments here and there that made very little impact in the grand scheme of things. Certainly as an SME, we've got to achieve a financial forecast, and we've got to deliver, keep our costs as low as humanly possible, and we want to go maximise our profits. So, we can't go and build a new eco factory because that's just not going to happen for us. But what we can do is adjust the way we behave a little bit.
Also, you can switch it to a renewable energy supplier, and then it's kind of like it give you more or less the same kind of output. So there is some really easy analysis you've done really well, and it's good for other companies to just say, oh, okay, then I can do that, and it's a good menu of implementation things.
And also as well, it's not a copy and paste. You can go down that route a little bit. You can. First thing I've done is to go onto the websites of the big companies and to look at some of the stuff that they're doing and say, right, okay, that works for me. I'm going to take a little bit of that. I'm going to take a little bit of that. It's like you said, the quick wins as well. Richard, you 9/10 of your presentation, you unselfishly did not speak about yourself as a company as well, but just how big of a company are you in terms of size, people?
Yeah, so we've been going a few years. We started in '91. We're now up to 20 full time with some part timers. We are over the 2 million mark in turnover. The vast majority of what we do comes from machine sales and service still. So we have a fleet of vehicles that are trying to get cleaner. We have lorries that deliver stuff, but we want to be cleaner.
Yeah.
And we face all the same challenges, I guess, that any small business does. But we've been very lucky to partner with you guys, which has meant that we've been able to be innovative in the way that we support the market. And as you might know, customers are in a position where budgets are occasionally prohibitive to buying and acquiring a new kit. They don't want to make a massive compromise. And our sector, world of CMMs, is very diverse. You've got incredibly high quality technology that has a premium price tag. You've also got budget entry level stuff that has a capability but is nowhere near parallel, and you can save a significant amount of money, but you're going to compromise on what you can deliver and what you can achieve. And we kind of hopefully fill that middle void of people that aspire to have new excellent kit in their business, but maybe a few years off that, but they desperately want the technology and aftercare you'd expect from a global OEM.
And just to back Richard there a little bit, we've noticed a slight plateau of asset investment in terms of new technology, and you've probably noticed a growth in terms of upgrades and retrofits as well. That's where it really works well. Perhaps a disadvantage for us is we're selling less kit, but we're noticing a lot more companies are spending more on the upgrades with us as well. and we're pushing that work then towards a company that is set up for that.
But that's where it's important, this relationship between someone like Hexagon and an SME.
And as you mentioned about this cluster as well.
Yeah,
It's so
you
important to
can't,
have collaborations, yeah.
you can flog your kit into
Exactly, yeah.
so many times, but by volume, you know, these guys are out there potentially winning much more contracts. And so, again, that's what I love about this, the fact that you've got the link between, you know, larger OEMs, whatever the case may be, and the guys are out there, out there doing this day in and day out, that actually might have been manufacturing stuff into the companies you're supplying equipment into as well. Bizarre concept, but, you know, and you guys are agile. These guys are agile and work, and they can be your sounding board for this sort of kind of stuff. It's like going over to Kieran's site over there and looking how he's working with Renshaw and people like that. You know, that's a collaborative environment to work in, to get state-of-the-art equipment back out that's fit for purpose, and that's all around environmental sustainability as well. So I love it. It's really powerful.
It's also like, you know, like we got these things in sustainability, we call it the secret currency, that is the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. So you possibly have some companies saying, oh, we fit SDG 5, 6, 10, there are 17 of them. And then they all have got like a sort of thing. And number 17 is partnership for the goal. So it's kind of like, and that's really important in sustainability. If there is no partnership to achieve the goal, there is no way that we could achieve it. So that is
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we haven't actually got a live speaker. This will be done through video, and this is a Mike White, who works at a company Smith and Woolwork.
Yeah, I don't know, Paul, because this is one of the video suggestions by Altair, because it ran at one of your events. I don't know if you have any a 10-word intro.
Yeah, I mean, it's just trying to fit in with the theme of the day, really. I think this is a company that presented at one of our events under the theme of sustainability, and I hope it fits in with the design element of the SIG here today, because these are a customer of ours that are looking at designing products with a much more sustainable approach.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hi there, welcome. Hello. Thank you for joining me. My name's Mike, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about mass timber construction. And well, hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be convinced that mass timber construction is the future of buildings. Start off with a little bit about me. So, as I say, my name is Mike. I'm a senior engineer with Smith & Woolwork. We are a structural and civil engineering firm based in Cambridge, UK. Work on projects typically £1 to £50 million, and in all the materials, particularly so specialise in timber, both kind of very bespoke timber, things like glulam frames and the like, but also in mass timber. And when I say mass timber, typically I'm going to be referring to cross-laminated timber, CLT. We also do little bits of research, so there's a DynaTTB project, which I'll tell you about a bit later, and bits of work at the University of Cambridge, again trying to work on CLT. To give a bit of context as to why we think CLT construction is so important, hopefully everybody is aware of the climate emergency, and I think although mass timber has enough benefits in its own right, even without considering the climate emergency and the need for change, the fact that we are suffering from a warming planet really drives home the urgency with which we need to make change, and we think that CLT can be a really big part of that change. And this is a really nice quote, I think, from the Secretary General. Climate emergency is a race we are losing, it's a race we can win. And so I strongly believe that mass timber construction is a key part in winning that race. I'll do a little bit of background just to give the kind of framework that we work in the UK around the climate emergency. So the UN have published their IPCC report, which gives really great science and understanding about climate change and what it is and what's causing it and what we need to do to fix it. And then aligned with that, the various UK institutions, including the Royal Institution of British Architects, the RIBA, have done a load of work establishing targets and baselines for the construction industry to work to help us get to where we need to be at the right time, make it when we need to be there. And so this chart shows quite nicely the kind of, we've got where we are at the minute at the top left corner. And so this chart was done in 2020, I should say, so it is a year or so old. So in theory, we should be along this graph and down the lines a little bit. But it shows actually where we need to be by 2025 and 2030. And so the bottom of that graph is really, that's the net zero whole life carbon. And that is the goal for our buildings. And we need to be there. And I think one of the things that really drives home in this is when you start to think about most construction projects, so kind of typical medium to large size construction project could easily take 3 years to go from the kind of initial idea to a completed building on site. 3 years time, almost time of speaking, is end of 2024, so we're nearly at 2025. So actually the decisions we make now are going to affect whether we meet these goals at the time of maximum in 2025. And 2030 is the backup, as you can see there, that's the minimum trajectory. We want to be aiming for the green zone. And this shows a bit of the scale of the challenge. So in the UK, this is a bit of kind of simple graph showing roughly what buildings are like at the minute. So that's the normal on the right in red and E, and we need to be up in the A. So we've got a decent way to go. The next question then with that is, how do we measure what we're doing? And this is quite a nice sort of simple way of splitting it. So we're generally concerned with this about carbon emissions. There are lots of other issues around sort of other environmental aspects of it, and environment damage, ecosystem loss, water demand, that kind of stuff. For this, we'll just focus on carbon. And so this splits whole life carbon kind of fundamentally into operational carbon and embodied carbon. Operational carbon being the energy you need to heat a building, to cool a building, to power all the lights in it, IT equipment, all of that stuff. And embodied carbon is the kind of the locked-in carbon in the building fabric itself. So when somebody turns the key on day one of that building, the embodied carbon is what you've got at that point. And typically as structural engineers, that's what we're most concerned with, because we don't really get involved in the operational carbon, because once the building's done, we're done, we're out of the way. So we're worried about embodied carbon. And there's been a lot of work done over the last few years on operational carbon, and really good low energy technologies have come in, and they're gradually becoming more mainstream, even simple things like an LED light bulb. But one of the things this graph shows is that as the operational carbon comes down, so as that you move sort of along to the right of those bars, then actually the embodied carbon starts to form a much bigger proportion of the building's total carbon cost. So it's all very well dealing with the operational, and initially, so under current building regs, operational is more than half of the whole life carbon of a building. But actually it doesn't take much to tip that balance, and then suddenly the embodied carbon is a really big proportion of the building's footprint. And so that's when it starts to become even more important to look at this and reduce it if we can. Unfortunately, the various bodies in the UK, so including the Institution of Structural Engineers, have published some really good data on the embodied carbon of materials. So there's all sorts of background to this, which I won't go into now, but roughly speaking, we're generally talking about the yellow bars on this chart and maybe the blue ones as well. So you've got the cradle to gate is the yellow, so that's the carbon that it takes to produce a material and deliver it to a construction site. And then the blue is a little bit on transport to get it to the site, and also wastage. And that's actually not insignificant. So for example, plasterboard used on walls in the buildings in the UK typically has a 20% wastage rate. So actually it can make a really big difference in the embodied carbon of the building. But as I say, based on that, for A1 to A3, the cradle to gate, the ISTRAC-D and other institutions have published lots of really good data here. So this generally in this format of kilogram CO2 emitted, so that's carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere for every kilogram of the material that arrives on site. And that metric is taken, so this example is concrete, that metric is taken across all the materials. So we have that data for timber, we have it for steel, we have it for bricks, everything that generally is on a construction site or project. And what we can do is we can take that data and do some really interesting stuff with it. And so this is some options analysis for different structural framing options for a generic student residential accommodation. So you can see rough from the layout, it's not massive, but it's kind of a good size. It's a typical sort of size that certainly we get involved with at Smith & Woolworth. And we've looked at 3 options. You've got a concrete frame, which is pretty standard typology. It's very good, it's very robust, gives good, really good acoustics for the building, it's fairly quick to build, it's established technology. Then we've looked in the middle there at masonry framing, so load-bearing masonry, so you've got brick or block walls with concrete planks to form the floors, and similarly very good sort of acoustically, quite slow to build, it's quite a sort of old school technology, but ultimately it's tried and tested and that can be cost beneficial. And then on the right we've got cross-laminated timber, CLT. And CLT is great for reasons we'll come into now. And we've got some sort of comparisons on the right hand side. Again, I won't go into too much detail. But probably the key one is down in the bottom right corner, this table down the bottom here, where we've got 3 options: reinforced concrete, RC, load-bearing masonry, LBM, and CLT. And that bottom line is the total embodied CO2, carbon dioxide. So we can see that the load-bearing masonry comes out the worst, and that's kind of the baseline that we use in these numbers. Reinforced concrete comes out at 80%, and that's typically because it's slightly lighter than masonry, because you've got columns rather than walls, which can be a bit less in the foundations, and also you don't have that material because you're not forming the walls with concrete. There is a level of detail that this doesn't go into, because with the masonry frame, your structure provides your walls with a reinforced concrete frame, you have to do that same thing. But then not going back to that table, you can see that CLT, so that's at minus 75%. So the CLT locks away, because trees are a carbon store, which we'll go into, CLT locks away the same amount of carbon as 75% of what the masonry frame emits into the atmosphere. So there is still some, with CLT, there is still some emissions, so cutting trees down, forming it into CLT, shipping it to site, all that stuff does generate emissions. But what that number is saying is it is more than offset by the amount of CO2 that locks away and keeps out of the atmosphere. And that's really important, because it means that we've got a double benefit. We're not just emitting CO2 as we would be with the concrete or the low-bearing masonry. We're actually taking it out of the atmosphere. So at this point, you're probably all wondering what CLT is. So as a sort of explanation of that, so CLT is basically, think of it as big plywood. So you fell a tree, you cut it into planks like this. So lots of the same planks, same size, same length, same cross section, and then you glue those together in a big factory into planks. And so these planks are typically somewhere around 14 metres long by 2.5 metres wide, and they're basically formed by overlapping layers of timber, and so that's why they're called cross-laminated. So the bottom layer will be, the grain of the timber will be aligned in one way, typically along the panel, and then the next layer up, the grain will be aligned across the panel, and then the next layer up along the panel, and so on and so on. And it's one of the nice things about it is that you can cut the initial lamina, these initial timber pieces, to different thicknesses as well, glue them up in different combinations of these thicknesses, and get a finished plank that's the depth you need it. So we can have CLT planks ranging anywhere from probably 60 mil deep to more like 200, 300 mil deep. So depending on what the purpose is, we're not wasting material by just using a standard product. And so this is then how they arrive at the site. So this is 3 floor panels stacked up on top of each other. You can see at the front edge here the different layers that are going on. So the top layers, the grain is running along the length of the panel, and then they're cross-laminated underneath. And the really nice thing about CLT is that this is how it arrives on site. So this comes off the back of a lorry, and on the back of the lorry you basically have a building in flat pack kit. It's like a big piece of furniture almost. And so the CLTs will be manufactured in that factory where they will cut out doors, services openings for water pipe work, ventilation ducts, all of that, and then it will come to site, as you see there, with all those holes pre-formed. And that's really important because that means we can do everything in a factory condition where it's quick, easy. You've got big machines that can cut all this stuff quickly with really high levels of accuracy. And then you just come to site, lift it into place, screw it down, and you're done. And one of the really big benefits of CLT is that it's a really, really fast form of construction. And as you can see here, this is probably this building in the foreground. Maybe that's a week's work. And all these panels just come in, they slot together, they're all machined to very tight tolerances, and it's a really fast, really clean form of construction, whereas doing those many walls in brickwork or concrete would take a really long time, and actually would mean a lot of material coming to site. You'd have lots of mortar and deliveries of bricks and lots of people moving materials around trying to keep it out of the way. The CLT is really clean, really quick, and just easy. Just another view of that building. Again, showing how little stuff there is on the site. It really is. A lorry comes in with a pile of CLT on the back, that gets lifted into place. A next lorry comes in with the next batch of the building. You don't need all this sort of stored material on the site waiting to be put up as they go. As I said, CLT is not perfect. There are some emissions involved in the manufacture of it, as I said. This graph is really trying to give a better picture of that. So this is from a project very similar to the one that was just in those images that I showed. And so the first 5 bars up there, so that's mainly foundations, the steelwork. There's some framing in this particular building to help support column-free spans. But you've got some concrete in the foundations, which is very hard to get rid of. Concrete is very good at doing that, being in ground, giving the life of the building. And so that has some negative CO2 emissions. But then what this shows is really that the CLT sequesters, so sequestering is locking the carbon away, pulling it out of the atmosphere as the tree grows and locking it away. The CLT sequesters significantly more carbon than is emitted by the materials, the other materials that aren't as carbon favourable. And so the blue bar, the dark blue bar at the bottom there, net CO2, that is the total net CO2 that is locked away in the building. And it's important to note that there is some debate about sequestration and whether we use it, because it's the slightly strange situation that it actually encourages you to use more material in the building because you lock more timber away. But there is a question as to what happens at end of life of the building. So in 60 years' time, when the building is done with, that timber will just get incinerated and all the carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere. And that benefit is just irrelevant. All you've done is delay the release of that CO2. And it's a very good question, and it's one we don't have an answer to because it's kind of crystal ball gazing into the future. I would argue that with the climate emergency, there is a real urgency. We have to do stuff now, partly because of tipping points where we might have environmental effects where there's no going back. And actually, the research seems to say that that's going to happen relatively soon, before 2050. And so, the more CO2 we can sequester out of the atmosphere now, the better. And there's a big discussion to be had about how we deal with that later, but it shouldn't stop us from making the right decisions now. But it's not all about carbon with CLT. As I say, I'm hoping by the end of this you'll be sold on the benefits of cross-laminated timber. And this one again shows some of the other benefits. So it's really quick, as I said, to build on site. And actually there are all sorts of other benefits. It performs quite well acoustically, it's very sustainable, as I said, very good air tightness, which gives very good operational carbon. It's much easier to make airtight than a masonry building. So there are loads of other benefits, and actually we're finding now on projects that timber is often coming out as being cost positive. So it's actually cheaper to build a timber building than a masonry or a concrete one. And a lot of that is to do with the time spent on site. Just I'll whiz through some images of some projects we've completed showing that actually a timber building doesn't have to look like a timber building. This is a boathouse near Cambridge for a rowing club. And inside you've got this amazing multifaceted roof form, all just done in the CLT, and I'm really pleased they've left this all exposed. This is a student accommodation in Cambridge, which has recently won a Passive House Award, or Passive House Shortlist, sorry, rather. And again, doesn't look like a timber building on the outside. To many people, I'd say that would look like a brick building. And then inside, you can just reveal the CLT in places. And there are some real proven benefits in what we term biophilic design, where actually people are calmer and more productive in a timber environment. So you can do what you want on the outside and get the aesthetic that you want on the inside. You can either hide it or you can reveal it and have all the kind of benefits that go with that. So there's another one. This is Magdalen College in Cambridge. So there's a CLT and glulam frame with load-bearing masonry piers for the aesthetic, so there's no hidden structure in that brickwork. It's all working quite hard. And again, you can get the most amazing results with that. And so what next for timber? Well, excuse the pun with this image, I'm hoping the industry is going to grow. We think there's no reason it shouldn't. Timber, there's so many benefits to it, and now that it's achieving cost parity with the other forms of construction, then yeah, there's nothing to stop it really. There is some more work to be done. There's a lot of work needed around fire, particularly in the UK or after the Grenfell disaster a few years ago. There's a big discussion around fire. And people get very concerned about CLT and fire because they think it's wood, so it burns. And it does, but it actually burns very predictably. And there is the kind of a good analogy really is if you're lighting a fire at home, say, and you put logs in the fire and you try and light the fire with just the logs and nothing happens. And you need kindling. And actually, because CLT has these big planks of timber, it's actually it's a big log. So once it burns, it will gradually burn, but it burns actually quite slowly and it's quite hard to set it alight. And so that makes it very predictable, which from a building safety point of view is great. So I wouldn't rule out timber on the basis of fire by any means, but there is definitely more research that needs to be done. Similarly, on vibration, this is the research project we've got slightly involved in on one of our projects with Diamond TCB, looking at shaking the building and seeing how the building responds to horizontal loads, which is particularly relevant to tall timber. And there's some really interesting work being done across the world, probably particularly in Scandinavia, around tall timber buildings, which I think are definitely we're going to be seeing more and more over the next few years, which is great. So that's it. Thank you for your time. I'm hoping that after this that you agree that CLT is a proven technology and that it's much needed for the future, but actually we have everything we need at this point to go ahead and use it in our buildings, and that frankly with the climate emergency I don't think we can afford to wait and build with more timber now. So yes, so thank you for your time, and I will leave you there. Bye.
I know it's hard to ask Mike any questions, but are there any thoughts regarding that video, or did anything pop out? There's a couple of things from me. I thought about the fact that it locks in the carbon in terms of, I'm not saying it's flaky, but I struggle with that a little bit in my head, just a touch. How you can grab that a little bit now and not worry about it in the future, perhaps. Yeah. That seems a little bit, I don't know, if I was to try to argue that on behalf of the company, if I was trying to sell something, perhaps morally I'd maybe struggle with that one a little bit for that. we've been doing a little bit of work out in Sweden where we've been working on very large turbines that are made out of wood instead of composite material, because obviously composite is quite difficult to renew. That's some of the work that we've been doing, and also when you mentioned at the end there about high structures made out of wood, that's one of the reasons why we moved away from wood in the first place. If I'm right there, could be wrong. Anything over, I think it was 5 stories originally. That's why we went to steel frame and the strengths of steel, perhaps. But it'd be quite interesting to see the work that they're doing there in the future with higher buildings. But there's just a few things that jumped out at me.
Christiana, do you have any comments on the capturing of carbon and stuff?
So we do actually some work with news detail also on sustainability and biodiversity projects, but also on sustainable structure. So we've been doing quite a lot in the motorsport area on structure. We don't particularly consider the sequestrated carbon at all in our calculations, because it's like at some point you will release it.
Yeah.
And also it really depends on how many years you have grown the trees for.
Okay.
So it's like he was showing like a very long bar. That's if the tree has been grown for 100 years, I think. But it's like normally if your tree has only gone for like 50 or 40 years, that reduces quite a lot. So it's like we wouldn't advise to use that number.
Okay.
So there is, for example, a lot of people do it because the balance is pretty good.
Yeah.
But it's like when you get to end of life, if you do, so you were talking about the cradle to gate, rather cradle to grave. So we do all our life cycle assessment from cradle to grave. But if you do to gate, you forget the part where what you're doing after, like how it's going to be end of life and second life. So for what concerns, it's quite interesting what you said about the wind turbine. We have been doing quite some work with the aerospace industry as well for the tail of the Boeing, because that's carbon fiber, like it's the same of wind turbine. And I actually quite good to report that in England there is the only company in Europe that can actually give a second life to their material.
Okay.
They're still a R&D incubator, although they're now developing a bigger company. But it's kind of like they've got a way to, through pyroxis process, to actually recover the carbon fiber and you can reuse it. So, and they use like burning to energy devices so that your carbon footprint are not a massive amount when you're trying to do the pyrolysis thing. So there is a kind of, I think it's quite funny because I think all the different industries have developed their own IP and know-how, but nobody is bringing them together. So that is what you can see.
I think that's key, isn't it? You know, it's all about the right material in the right place and in the right quantities.
Yeah.
You know, you drive around Warwickshire looking at what's going on with HS2, and I'm not turning this into any political debate whatsoever, but you know, you see the trees being felled and huge areas being cleared, and then the amount of concrete that's coming in, it's flabbergasting. It's eye-watering.
Struggling with it,
Yeah. And I think we just need to be thinking more about how we balance and use the right materials in the right quantities in the right places, rather than just broad brushing with the cheapest or the easiest, and get all those elements in place before making the decisions.
So the problem what you've got as well, when you talk about the whole sustainability piece, is like how I joked about planting trees as a way of offsetting, okay? So what's interesting, so there's an accelerator program being launched by one of the catapults recently, which is weird. It's through what was the transport catapult, which is now the connected places catapult. It's linked to construction, and it's all about CO2 reduction and so on and so forth. And what's interesting is it's not rocket science to figure out who this company is based in Milton Keynes that run on the rail network, figure that one out. But they've got a huge problem. What they're trying to do, so you've got that part of it going on where just massive great construction project. They've got a huge infrastructure problem with trackside buildings. But what they're moving away is rather than them being constructed, they want them manufactured. So a couple of companies that I've got that clients of mine are actually in a warehouse, a bit like that CLT process, manufacturing it in a controlled environment, and they just literally go in there, lift and drop, take old one down, lift and drop. So the whole thing around, that's another way of them they're doing that part of it, creating a massive amount of mess and problem, and then another way they're trying to offset it by going, we're not going to turn up on site and all the boxes it's going to tick. We haven't got to shut the railway down for 4 or 5 days while we knock something down, rebuild it. We can clear it overnight and put another structure over the top of it. So I think this comes back to this thing around opportunity in sustainability. What does it mean? You know, and again, they are genuinely SME companies, couple of million turnover, and they will see their company grow exponentially in the next couple of years because they're talking of thousands of traps. I'm not saying they're going to do them all, but there's thousands of these traps like things where there's a huge amount of valuable kit in there, but they've been sitting there for God knows how many years. But they need to be replaced. And they are, so it's weird. They're trying to find a better way of doing it, but then again, they're tearing down trees and houses and God knows what else. So it's that real sort of yin and yang side of it, really, is what these companies are doing.
It needs to happen, but
so that's why that whole thing, I mean, not being funny, but I've been around long enough, unfortunately, to the whole thing around constructing buildings inside factories. I mean, not being funny, McDonald's restaurants all built inside the factory, aren't they? Lifted and dropped. It's not a new, it's nothing new about it, but it's just interesting that there's this whole, incentive now to be seen to be doing more and more and more and more of it. And all the way through, I was thinking, fire. I mean, I say this, that's only
that's fair enough,
because all I've listened to the last couple of days is Grenfell again. You're thinking, they're ripping millions and billions of pounds of cladding off of it.
Because of Mercedes,
But how far can you then get with? But it's a product we've been building with for thousands of years, so it works. And it's this compromise between what works in some areas and won't work in others at the end of the day. So putting those kind of buildings up in other countries around the world probably makes absolutely sense, but you're probably not going to get away with putting one up in the middle of, I can't think of somewhere now, but it's all about how it works, isn't it? But there are some serious companies out there with some serious problems that companies around this area and others can solve, and it's genuinely going on. It's transformational for these guys at the end of the day. So,
There's an assumption that's going to get burned at the end and release the carbon. Why can't it be reused?
What you were saying with batteries, wasn't it? Okay.
I think that's a good point. I think you can kind of, if they envisage the reuse it, because then you need to the customer. But if they will say in 20 years or 40 years, we pick it up and reuse it, then I can do a much better calculation of what is valuable or not, and it's much stronger. And that's what happens with batteries, like energy storage, so that you know that you're going to be used for another 10 years. Therefore, your carbon footprint can actually be calculated over the So maybe that is something to suggest them, like to do like a bit of a get more of a robustness on the life cycle assessment.
Well, it's a great thing. It's like what happens when we're breaking down a house or recycling a battery or a car, and that consideration needs to factor in a lot more than has been done at the moment.
It's a bit like we might not know now, but we certainly will know in the future. So let's hedge on that as well.
Exactly.
So that's a bit like the old space, and you know what I mean.
It's also policy, because for the battery, like in 2014, the government, the government introduced something for which, if you are OEMs manufacturing the battery for your electric car, you are responsible of the end of life, and you cannot get out of it. So it's kind of like
tied in.
I think it's something that is not happening in construction. So if you are a construction company, you doesn't matter. Like once you deliver, that's not your project anymore. While if you are a polymer car,
it'll be the same for the metrology company in the future as well.
I think it's about those intergenerational decisions, isn't it? Where if you look at it, in Derby, we were renowned for tearing down really beautiful buildings and building some fairly sort of modern, short-term fix buildings that people are now sort of in uproar about. One of the things they did with the museum was, rather than build something new, was they did gut the building, but they built a new structure within it, and it's incredible. And they've repurposed something that was existing. And I think, from my point of view, I'd like to see a lot more of that sort of activity than talking about using wood. I just think that's much.
Wood is good in some places. Like for example, we're building a net zero house in Italy. We couldn't use wood because that's seismic area. So it's kind of like you have to use certain steel and certain, but we had to add the wood roof because that's seismic area, so they're not allowed you to build a structure. So it's kind of like, I think as well depends, as we were saying, is that depends very much of what you want to do and where you're located as well, and it's kind of the bridging regulation for the area.
It's a good point, because that was like the fix on population, wasn't it, with the tower blocks, why tower blocks were built.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then it's like, well, they seemed to lived in. You know, you'd be honoured to get when they originally built. Oh yeah, that's how they sold the pitch. But now it's like, okay, let's knock them down. They're they're horrible on the eye. That's probably what you mentioned there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can we take a coffee break?
Sorry, come, yeah.
Maybe 10 minutes or so?
10 minutes, yeah.
11:25.
Okay, 11:25.
Hello, welcome back. Hi Pamela, can you see me?
I can see you.
Oh, that's okay, that's good. Hi, I'm Tim Gears. We're hosting the event today, Hexagon Manufacturing Intelligence. I just want to introduce Pamela now. So Pamela, she works for the Midland Aerospace Alliance, which we've been a partner with, God, for many years now. And she'll be talking about exciting funding opportunities available for companies wanting to support their sustainability drive. So this will be a very interesting talk. So can I just hand it over to you, Pamela? Is that okay?
That's great. And can everybody hear me fine in the room? Is that going well?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. Is that okay? Okay, brilliant. I'll go and sit down, Pamela.
Excellent. I shall take it away. Thanks for inviting me to speak today. I will introduce you to the general activities of the Midland Aerospace Alliance, which we call MAA shortly, and how we try to help to nurture all sorts of innovation in the aerospace world. But I thought I'd like to start by talking about what does sustainability mean in the aerospace supply chain in the kind of broadest sense. So we're having a bit of a debate within our organisation at the moment as we try to help companies with sustainability about what it really means. So I just think it's worth taking a minute to look at it on the different levels that it plays. There's of course a really big picture, the sort of wholesale change that you'll see being talked about in projects like Fly Zero, Jet Zero with new concepts for propulsion and air transport. I mean, obviously there's individual measures in specific companies which decreasing emissions and energy use, which I guess is a little bit more about what you've been focusing on today. But, you know, we get very involved with moves to develop technology, so technology development of products, things like lightweighting, reducing fuel consumption, all those sorts of measures, and these sorts of imperatives have been drivers for the whole aerospace industry, from an economic and a flight physics point of view, for the whole life of that industry. But it is also worth thinking about how some of the more recent events are pushing that sustainability agenda in some quite odd ways. But you're probably aware, you know, the pandemic and travel patterns that's led to faster retirement of older aircraft, which oddly it has given opportunities for new technologies sooner than we might have expected. But also, you know, lower delivery rates of aircraft. So that's taken the pressure off just that day-to-day slog for the more conventional aerospace manufacturing companies. And you know, the smart companies that were in good financial state when the pandemic hit sort of 18 months or so ago, you know, those with future focused leaders were saying, well, this is a time to focus on how we are working as a company, how we're delivering, looking at our business models and our practices, and how we become, you know, more effective, efficient and productive. And there's usually a good alignment with sustainability within that. You know, everything that you want to do from a business point of view usually points to some sort of sustainability measures. But particularly, I'd say it's also a bit of a drive to more towards sort of automation and probably some of the things that you're thinking about in simulation and sustainability. One characteristic of particularly aerospace companies having to shrink because of the pressures of pandemic was that they are now needing to do more with fewer staff, and that's not just
staff working harder, it's a lot of staff taking on different roles. So again, if you've got several new roles to look at, you will probably be looking at more automated, more efficient ways of doing your day-to-day business. And that could have opportunities for, I think, some of you companies who are looking at helping companies to model their operations and to put in more automation and simulation and help them to build their product with less manual work in all sorts of ways, whether that's design or manufacture. And then just the sort of final thought is a little bit about sustainability, a little bit in more the kind of resilient sustainability sense. So not quite so much the environment and energy focus, but a thought towards how we rebuild industries after the shock that we've been through. And we really do expect to see a bit more of a regional focus, which is interesting in the forum that you're meeting in today, interesting for us as a regional aerospace alliance. But I think each region will focus a little bit on certain aspects of some of those future flight possibilities and sort of alternative propulsion, changes to aerospace and whole new concepts such as the drones, urban air mobility and the like. We do see regional focus where companies cluster around one of those big disruptors. Things like not aerospace, but the Dyson effect in the West Country, and we expect to see more of those emerging. We know that a lot of the really innovative companies doing exciting things in technology are probably playing in numerous industries, and that's good for resilience and sustainability from their own point of view, and really good for technology transfer from one industry to another and getting a really robust solution to where we're going in the future. So just thinking that future growth might come from unexpected places and not necessarily even the customers that are dominant now. And so for anyone looking to get into the aerospace supply chain, do work with us and think about where it might be. It might be not a case of displacing someone who's there already, but a really smart way of finding your niche. And that successful delivery of these newer technologies might well come from some unexpected small companies. So how's this going to happen with some input from the MAA? Well, hopefully. So talking about the MAA in general, we play into 3 areas. We have business development group, supply chain performance group, and technology development groups. Those are our industry panels that direct the activities of the Midlands Aerospace Alliance. We do all our work really through information sharing and best practice sharing, networking, bringing people together. That's really how we operate, and you will see that kind of thread of how we work and communicate through a lot of our work. So there's 4 regional aerospace alliances in the UK, but the Midlands one is quite unusual in that we've had a real focus on technology projects, and we've created and managed a number of those projects. NATED's probably the biggest one that you know about. But today I'll talk to you about the current. I'll move on to talking about the current project, which is a real focus on aerospace up in a second. Sorry, I'm going to. We have quite recently worked on the DRAMA project, which was an Innovate UK style funding opportunity on getting metal additive manufacturing into the aerospace supply chain. We worked with a lot of smaller companies and found out some quite interesting stuff about what the best routes were for the companies who maybe weren't going to be doing metal manufacturing themselves. And all this is, really playing towards that sustainability, because it's efficiency of manufacture, lightweighting, and to nod to the theme of today, there's quite a lot of simulation possible in the processes and the post-processing of metal additive components. So then coming to the topic, the current programme, which is open for applications, we are developing a cross-sector programme, Pivot, with the West Midlands Combined Authority. That's a little bit further into the actual West Midlands area, so it depends if some of you are more out of the Silverstone region, but look for that, growing and coming more on stream in the future. But aerospace unlocking potential is really aimed at developing links between the supply chain and the University of Nottingham for the lead partner, but really promoting and supporting a culture of innovation in our Midlands businesses. It is about technologies and products, but really that strength in practice of innovation development is one of the primary aims. A lot of companies think they don't really do innovation, but both MAE and the University of Nottingham are working together in this ERDF funded programme to really help them to develop their latent skills. So getting into a few more sort of practical details of this programme. To benefit from it, you need to be an SME in one of the 8 LEP areas listed. So I know some of the neighbouring LEPs to South East Midlands will be of interest, as well as South East Midlands. Just a note of caution, which I think our map is slightly out of date. Some of the more southern reaches of said LEP have recently moved exclusively into the Buckinghamshire Thames Valley LEP and may no longer be eligible. So talk to us about where you're based, and we will help work this out for you. We're looking for companies who are already working in the aerospace supply chain, or if you're simply looking to diversify in there, that will be qualification enough. So I will come to the grant funding in a second, but I couldn't miss out all the other sort of non-financial funding, which is also available through this quite comprehensive programme. That includes technical workshops, direct one-to-one support from the Nottingham Precision Manufacturing Centre for short-term projects. It's possible to get support from the Nottingham academic body as well, depending on what you want to do. They can be funded from aerospace up. And you can get mentoring from both the University of Nottingham and the MEA technology team. Plus there's student placements. We have quite regular events such as Aerospace Up Hour and Additive Hour Plus, and they're open to anyone at all. Excuse me while I take a call. But the more in-depth, longer workshops, such as some we've run on Six Sigma and a recent really successful series on aerospace quality and standards, which we're likely to repeat, you need to be an enrolled and eligible SME in the area to benefit from some of those more comprehensive but non-financial support packages. Then getting on to the meat of the interesting topic of the day, the grant programmes. So we're looking for individual companies to apply for grants. These projects have to have an innovation content, but it's not as onerous as things as Innovate UK or maybe some of the EU funding mechanisms, the framework programme as opposed to this, which is ERDF funded. We are looking for something that's directed towards development of new products and new technologies, but it doesn't have to be completely new to the industry. It's kind of new to company. There's no need to have a fully formed project idea before coming to us. We work very collaboratively, even on the process of working up the application. You get a lot of support in that. We want you to succeed, and we want you to succeed without doing a lot of bigotry work that gets thrown away. That's still based on the fact that we're really, as I said it before, we're aiming to develop the skills of the companies as much as we are the technologies. It's also quite interesting that your proposal isn't really in competition with any other proposal. It's you need to meet the eligibility standards, meet that innovation standard, and if you do meet that, and we still have grant available in your area, then you should get funded. You are next in the queue and you should get funded. So grants in the South East Midlands area are awarded at a rate of just over 42% of the eligible costs of the project. There are bigger funding rates available in Stoke and Staffs and Lincolnshire, because they're differently they are a different category as less favoured regions. As far as the grant amount goes, we're interested in all sizes. The minimum grant size is £1,000, and it can range up to £100,000. That would be about a £240,000 spend for £100,000 of grant. So we fund. We can't guarantee that lots of projects are going to get through at that maximum rate, but something like up to about 75k would be a really ideal project size to be looking at. Process, as I've said, you're not in competition. It aims to be user friendly, where it's a rolling process where we look at project applications every couple of weeks. There is a step where you might need to present to one of the MAA's industry working groups, which comes slightly less frequently, but we say allow about 3 months to get from first application to funding. It is an expression of interest in the full proposal. Having said that, I think our record is 3 weeks, depending on how diligent you are in getting on things and how you hit the meeting dates. So we'd often aim to be shorter than 3 months of getting the funding to you. The funding decisions, we've made an agreement with our government department funder, and it's the decisions on funding and eligibility are all being made locally within the project delivery team. So there's not a long wait for sort of departmental approval. If you're successful in getting through that process, the monitoring process is fairly light touch. The one thing that's a bit different in this scheme than a lot of schemes is just that the eligible costs are listed there. It's best to think of it as external spend, really, consumables, some level of equipment and services from third parties, but that only staff that's hired new for the project with start date after the project start date can be claimed in this mechanism, not existing staff, as you might expect if you were doing Innovate UK type work. And then this is just a bit of a rundown of some, but not all of the projects that we've awarded already, sort of grouped a little bit by topic. Not much of a focus on simulation in this talk, I agree, but such projects would definitely fit very much within the aerospace eligibility, provided they meet those innovation criteria. Whilst we're really committed to the bottom-up model for innovation, where the applicant companies are setting their priorities and focusing on what they know will be helpful to them in developing in future. We do expect to see sort of things like digitalisation and Industry 4.0 playing fairly strongly. And that could include a bit of things on future planning and infrastructure, streamlining things through less transport steps in manufacturing, that sort of thing. So maybe some of the things you might have been talking about today, which I'm guessing at a little as I'm not in the room. But just moving on to just quickly illustrate some of the projects I think might be of interest to you as a group that we've already funded. There's more of these, which you can see in different topic areas that we're advertising on the Aerospace Up website. This is a project by Electrical Cooling Solutions, a company that's got that has spun out of a university environment itself. And they are looking at making high detail simulation tools for electric motor designers more affordable and easier to use with a new platform they've developed that I think builds on industry standard kit, but makes it much more approachable and easier to use. Then one in additive manufacturing, a topic that I'm particularly keen on and have a bit more knowledge on. In fact, so Metron Additive Engineering, they're developing a capability to create distortion-corrected build files for metal additive manufacturing processes, and they're doing that through applying advanced metrology and modelling techniques. And so they've had a grant of £61,000 and are running a project over about 12 months to deliver their work. We're currently looking for projects which will complete by August 2022, but we are in discussion with our funding body, and we fully expect to have at least a 6-month extension on that project. However, we can't quite commit to that until that's all signed and sealed. And then this other project, which has been awarded very recently, Impression Technologies are doing something, you'd have to say broadly similar to Metron, but for a hot sheet forming process for aluminium. It's metrology, modelling, making sure that the processes are done more accurately, and efficiently, that less wastage, more reliable, right first time production, which has a bit of simulation and a bit of sustainability there too. And then finally, just a project on electronic materials. I know the company are doing simulation and modelling in the design of the materials before they make them. So those sorts of projects are all very eligible in aerospace and unlocking potential if you've got something similar or along those lines. We also have a couple of sustainable aviation fuel projects coming along, which do some simulation in them as well. Just to illustrate, these are the companies who've signed up already. We've got over 100 companies already benefiting from aerospace unlocking potential, and we hope to triple that by the end of the project, getting about 300 plus companies on board in one way or another. Because I've not been able to be with you in the room today and have those conversations, but Pim may or may not have explained, you definitely don't want me in the room today with COVID as I have it. We've arranged another informal sort of information session next Tuesday from 11:30. Pim and Trudy will be circulating details of this. You can sign up for that on the MEA event website, or get in touch with me. We'll be talking a bit more detail about specific projects you might be thinking of if it's a fairly small group, or we can talk through in more detail how the funding mechanism works and arrange a one-to-one meeting fairly soon to follow that up. And then we can also let you know that we'll be launching other types of support of the sort of the workshop type technology road mapping, entry into aerospace, sustainability in general, industry 4.0 and adopting additive manufacturing among other topics. So there's lots to benefit from by enrolling on Aerospace Up and talking to us about what support might work for you as a company. And then just finally a little plug for an event that we're running at the end of January, starting to look about how sustainability pressures and measures will affect our industry. That's 27th of January at MTC face to face. We'll be looking at the big picture in the morning and then focusing a bit more on company level sustainability in the afternoon. But don't worry, if you've already committed to this STC event on the same day that Pim made me aware of, this is very much the start of a process, and there'll be lots of further events. They won't all be face to face. Some of them will be online, which I'm quite keen on, even when I'm not ill. That it's quite a good way to connect with a broader range of people, and get a lot of people involved in the conversation. So look out for that on our event webpage. That's me, probably slightly long, sorry, but open to a few questions, and anybody from the Aerospace Up team is happy to talk to you in detail about how the project might help you as a company.
Okay, I just want to say thank you even more so for the fact that you've got COVID, and knowing quite a few people who've gone through that, it's probably the least thing you want to do right now. So I'm mindful of your time, but I'll just open it up to the room if there are any questions. There's not. One question that I've got, I don't know if that's okay. I've been involved over the last, I would say, 5-6 years now in business development, and that is trying to help smaller companies understanding the opportunities there are through funding, especially through the likes of Innovate UK and the Horizon 2020 pot. It always seems quite a challenge, quite difficult to understand the paperwork, to understand how the forms work, and especially from a financial point of view, in terms of and also trying to get your bid successful as well. You always hate to say have to try 3 or 4 times to be successful to get perhaps one through. In terms of the innovation grant, have you seen that change slightly in terms of the success rate in terms of applications?
In our grant,
yes.
In Aerospace Up. So as I think I said during the bit about some of the more details, which whether that came across clearly or not, we are really passionate about not making companies go through an onerous application process that they only have a 30-20% chance of success. So we have a really basic application form. It's a few pages long, but it's not locked. Your text won't go off the end. You won't get marked down if you use the wrong font size.
Okay.
We'll work with you to fill it in, and as I was saying, that you're actually competing against yourself. You're competing against the criteria to some extent, that you have to meet a sort of minimum level of innovation and to be eligible. You know, it has to have a bit of a development content. It can't just be increasing your capacity. It can't be doing more of the same. But as long as you're doing something that's different for your company, and you can articulate to us why that's innovation in your terms, and we will help you to describe that. If you are the next person in the queue and you get your application in on time, and we can tick the boxes to say this will pass audit with our funder, then you get the money. As long as there's money in your region, it's a kind of first come first serve basis. So definitely, don't hang about. If you've got a project that you think would work, we'd help you to make a bit of. It has to be a bit of a step change, as I'm saying. It can't just be an incremental improvement. It has to be doing something a bit different. So there has to be that imperative that this wouldn't happen without a bit of funding. It could be something you've been thinking about for a few months or even years that you'd like to approach as a company, but you don't have the space. So that's where maybe a new employee might be something that would help you achieve that. And then it's quite a low risk way to take on someone new, because you're getting, it partially funded. It's a bit of there's no ruling against fixed term contracts. So even if you're taking someone on for the duration of the project and then seeing where it goes, then that can be really positive experience, I think, for companies as well. But also that it pays for external services. So if there's something that you need that will help you to pin down whether or not you're going in the right direction, getting that partially funded, a bit less than 50% is quite good in this climate.
Thank you.
That comes across.
No, it does. Very good, very good. So yeah, we'll leave it at there. I've just been given the nod. So
used up the time and probably more.
But thank you so much for your time. But I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. See you again.
Thanks.
Okay, our last speaker today is Paul Cookham from Altair. Is that correct?
It is correct.
Is that correct? From the UK. So Paul will be detailing their work with vortex blades and how they manage to gain efficiency through effective simulation. Thanks, Paul.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak this as well.
Thank you for your time.
So I'll start off by introducing myself and why I'm stood here in front of you. So to say thanks, Paul Kirkham. My entire career has been in simulation. I'm a CAE engineer by background, and I've now been with Altair for 12 years. Initially, again, still as a CAE engineer, as a consultant, but more recently as an account manager. So a change of hat really, and now we're trying to help my clients understand what it is I love about simulation and how it can help inject innovation into what they're trying to do. We are an American-owned company, so I can't give any presentation without giving you the corporate vision statement, which is very American. It's wording, but ultimately, it's exactly as just described my role. Our vision is to help our clients inject innovation into their products, into their processes through the use of simulation primarily, coupled with AI and high-performance computing, all this sort of complementary technologies to enhance the simulation.
You're also champions of this.
Absolutely, and if we go back to that, the DSM, CST, so we've got all the acronyms on there. I think, personally, that simulation part is very much what I love and I really am passionate about. So, to be a super champion of the simulation element of the DSM is something very keen to be involved in and very pleased to be able to. Altair in numbers, more for the purposes again of really setting that scene. And I think the key for me on this slide is that it's 1985. Altair has been at the heart of simulation since the mid 80s, and grown to the point we are today, where we've got over 12,000 customers, 86 offices around the globe. So lots of different experiences, but importantly still able to provide that local service through having offices in all regions. We have 3 offices in the UK. Leamington Spa is our main UK head office, and then 2 smaller satellites in Bristol and Manchester. Again, really just so we can live and breathe the client's problems and be as close to them as possible. The customer slide really here more to demonstrate the breadth of experience we have, the types of different areas that the simulation now plays a part. global HQ for Altair's Detroit. So it's no surprise that the simulation capabilities of Altair came about because of the automotive sector, and that's where they were really first adopted from Altair's perspective, and that's where a lot of the business grew. But it's now applied in pretty much every sector, in every country around the globe, where advanced engineering, lightweighting, sustainability, all these different factors become so important to all these different industries. And I think that's sort of epitomised really by the pace of innovation and the complexity of the products. The single-use, single-purpose products are a thing of the past. Components get more and more complex, multifunctional. Look at our smartphones. It's used for making a phone call for a fraction of the time it's used for guiding us in our cars with sat nav or keeping up to date on news and social media, etc., etc. So they're all becoming multifunctional and multi-purpose, and I think that's where these additional capabilities of hooking up simulation with AI and HPC comes into it. But the simulation is at the heart of everything that is important to this presentation, and really I've got the others here just because hopefully as I go through some of these examples from our customers, you can see the direction this is going and how important these pieces become in the future. So in terms of simulation, what does simulation mean? It's used by different people in different areas, and for me and for Altair, simulation tends to cover this type of physics that we use that really define the loads that the various products in the different industries are seeing, whether that's maths and system modelling, all the way through the different types of manufacturing simulations, from injection moulding and casting, to stamping, additive manufacturing, carbon fibre composites, etc., etc. But electromagnetics, so many of these products now are connected. They're full of antennas and receivers, so understanding how they behave in conjunction with the more traditional structural analysis, and of course how that couples with thermal and fluid. And it is that coupling. I think again going back to that multifunctional purposing of everything we're looking at. Again, trying to focus on that lightweighting, using the minimal mass materials. We have to perform optimization, but it has to be coupled to the various different types of physics that we've just seen. And I think this is where we start on that sustainability journey, really. When we look back to the early adoption of computer simulation back in the 80s, it was very much in a product validation area. It was all about replicating what was being done, physical tests. And it's in its own way that was starting that journey to sustainability, because that was what enabled the reduction in the amount of prototyping that was being done. So you've got the expense of building a prototype, you've got the wastage that comes from sometimes testing it and destroying it, having to go around that iterative loop, then of repeating, iterating on the design and go again. And then as we've moved further through the decades, you see the emergence of the simulation-driven design, where you can bring that simulation further up front into the process, and before you've even touched the 3D CAD, and certainly long before you've had to do any prototyping, you're able to really start to optimize that design through the use of simulation, long before you get any closer to building a product. The bit that I find interesting now is the emergence of the data-driven design. I think if we think about the simulation that Altair as clients have been performing, there's a huge number of assumptions that go into all those models. There's assumptions about the material properties, there's assumptions about the loading characteristics, about the environmental situation that the products are going to be in, and even the fact that mostly things are simulated at a nominal design, and the tolerancing of the build and assembly process isn't per se taken account of. Whereas if we can start to hook up and use a data-driven approach where we can gather data live from the field, or really start to make use of the huge pools of data that have previously been gathered, then we can start to remove a lot of those assumptions and get even finer into the detail to make sure that not only are we're covering a broader range of that set of products that's out there, but maybe we're just simulating each and every product that's out there, and we're starting to develop those genuine digital twins. So just looking back from one of our clients, Baker Hughes, they've used that same simulation process to accelerate their product development. Now, again, if we look at that from that sustainability perspective, that's great. They've reduced the number of prototypes, they've reduced the amount of testing, and they've got their product to market quicker. Now, Baker Hughes are developing, it's an energy industry technology, and it's all helping a cleaner and greener product out in the field. So not only have they been able to cut down on their testing, which in itself is sustainable, but by getting that product to market quicker, it is also having that effect on their client sustainability. So I think we need to be mindful of, obviously, some of these things are a win-win. We've been doing a lot of this, but we've not really been considering it as a sustainable feature. It's been driven by that bottom line of cost. And we need to open our eyes and widen what we're looking at when we should start to do that. I flip back to this because that was an example of where we've been deploying the technology to produce the prototypes, but of course the prototypes pay into significance compared to the amount of volumes of the product being used in the field. So savings that can be had in that type of arena can have a far greater impact on the sustainability of the product and ultimately the planet. So an example here from Serapid, where they've been able to utilise the technology to do mass optimisation and lightweighting, again, because it helps their bottom line, but the knock-on effect is huge. And as they say here, when you're getting through so much material, saving a few percent here and there is, again, that huge win-win. But I think if we're going to look at the sustainability angle in a bigger detail, it's more than just the getting the product out into the market in the first instance. It's making sure it has longevity in that market, and that it is being used at its highest value at the lowest operational cost possible. And again, easy wins that by deploying simulation technology, particularly using optimization around this, not only have they been able to reduce the weight of the components, but they've been able to increase the durability. So the in-service performance is heavily increased, and therefore the amount of time, money, infrastructure used in supporting it in the future is reduced. So I want to give an example now from a Spanish startup called Vortex Bladeless, who have again been deploying simulation technology to minimise their prototyping, to try and get an upfront design as close as practically possible to the finished article, but a product that's again hopefully innovative and sustainable in its usage. So what you see here is the Tacoma Bridge back in 1940, which at the time was the world's third largest bridge, and obviously back in 1940, designed without the use of simulation technology, but unfortunately, subjected to a natural phenomena of resonance. So the wind loadings on this bridge interacting with the structure and unfortunately causing this somewhat horrific looking resonance that ultimately led to its collapse. But what David and the guys at Vortex are trying to do is harness that resonance, which is usually an unwanted feature in many products, and use it for good. Use it to generate energy. So rather than have this very long, low-level structure, they feel that if you use a vertical aligned structure that can capture resonance, it becomes much more positive without having the huge impact. So what you see here is an example of their product attached to the side of a building, freely resonating away, being caused by the wind. The beauty of it being vertical is it functions well regardless, 100% efficiency regardless of whichever angle the wind is blowing, so there's no complex mechanisms in rotating into the wind. And essentially that resonance is causing this outer shell to move, and inside that structure is a stiff vertical rod made from carbon fibre, with approximately halfway up the length of that an axial symmetric alternator. So as the outer shell moves in the wind, the alternator is excited and harvests the electricity. So they use simulation tools all the way through the initial concept phase, both in terms of the alternator itself. One of the advantages of it being completely axial symmetric is it can simplify the model, which means they can run it even faster, they can explore even more the design area and really make sure they're optimizing required performance characteristics to get the maximum energy generation whilst getting the longevity of the components. This is one long video rather than a series of slides, so my time for this myself. So here you can see, yeah, that movement of the outer portion against the static. And one of the things they can do because of that is use the sort of resistive forces and the repelling forces of the electromagnetics to be able to tune the system perfectly against any given wind speed, so it can adjust its own electromagnetic forces to make sure it's always operating in optimal conditions and harvesting the most energy regardless of wind speed and wind direction. Again, simulation tools used to help understand that. So one of the key advantages of this is there's no mechanical maintenance, there's no complex gearboxes or gear systems. It's got a long lifespan as a result. Minimal visual impact compared to some other green energy methods, particularly wind turbines, and certainly not got the same noise impact that the whirring of the blades or motors has in other areas. Use of another simulation technology here for the structural capabilities, making sure that again that durability and longevity is adhered to, so that once this item is put in place, it needs very little, if any, maintenance whatsoever, because it can withstand all situations that it's scarcely fearable. And simply in terms of the manufacturing, because there's fewer of the more complex components that we've seen in other wind energy generation products, then there's probably a 40% reduction in energy used in actually creating the product in the first place.
So having used simulation throughout that concept phase and really helped to design the product, they're now at the point where they've manufactured their first batch of 100 of these things, and they're starting to do some internal testing as well as testing out in the field. And for that, in the field testing, this is where this data piece comes back to this. So by using some of the IoT and data technologies, you can now gather that data live from the field, plug that back into that digital version of the physical product, and really make sure, A, that your assumptions are correct and that your design is right, but also allowing you to continually update and optimize the product for its best performance. And yes, whilst they're working on their first product at the nano end of the scale, there's future products in the pipeline, again, able to use that simulation technology at a simplistic scale to make sure that it all stands up and stacks up as they move up. And the vision being Vortex Goliath that stands at a whopping 140 meters tall, and able to produce a megawatt of electricity. And again, the basics of that have been backed out through some math and system modeling tools to make sure that their assumptions are correct before continuing to the development of that, rather than going down the process and spending loads of time and money and creating a footprint for a product that isn't going to be viable. So I think, in summary here, I think what this particular example is trying to show is that there's a wide variety of different uses for simulation, and how they can be used both upfront and in service, and particularly on an example that hopefully brings us some novel solutions. It's all about injecting innovation to try and create a more sustainable future. I think we've still got a long way to go, as we've heard throughout the day. And apologies that there is some repetition here with some things that have already been said. But I think it doesn't hurt to hammer home some of these things that we've already heard today. So some things I found out was that according to World Bank Group, the world's generating over 2 billion tons of solid waste, which is just phenomenal. And even more frightening is that that's continuing to rise and is expected to be 3.4 billion by 2050. And it seems staggering that only 13.5% of that waste is recycled. So I think if we're going to change this, I think that the pressure really is on us all to create more sustainable practices, more sustainable processes. And as an engineer, I think we want to start to think differently about how we do that. And to reiterate what Christina said at the start of the day, really, it needs a good look at that life cycle. As we've seen today, we're very familiar with this cradle-to-grave approach, this linear approach of developing an easy-to-use, lightweight, cheap solution. But if it just gets thrown away at the end of that first useful life, then that's not good if we're only recycling 13.5% of that product. So again, as we saw earlier, I think this circular product life cycle is the way we need to be going, where there's an increased focus on recycling, but more importantly on repurposing. And when we are designing these products, we are very conscious of how those are going to be used, not just in their first life, but the second and the third. The materials and the manufacturing processes we're sourcing and using, we understand how they're created, how they can be used, how they can be disposed of. And to make sure that we're using that component for as long as possible at its highest value, but when that life comes to an end, that we go beyond
that first life, and we reuse, or we remanufacture, or we refurbish to give second, third, fourth lives to these products. A couple of examples that I found. So US retailer Target is committed to using this circular design approach on all of its products by 2040. And I guess for them it's a slightly different meaning of circularity, but they want to make sure that they're creating products that are more durable, more easily repairable, and if not recyclable, and that the materials that they're using are sourced sustainably and can be either regenerated or recycled. Closer to home, certainly for me, the automotive OEMs are also looking at how they're going about things. Again, I think we spoke earlier about the heavy use of high stiffness, high strength steels in automotive products, and obviously they have their place because of the importance of safety and crash structures, but that's not applicable to every component of the car. It's been easier to use steel all over the car because you can join steel to steel, but where it's not required, you want to use the right materials in the right places, and that could be through the use of sustainable plastics or other composites, aluminiums, but of course that creates challenges in the joining. Automotive adhesives have been around for a long time, but again, they cause issues with that recyclability because you can't then split them back out from the joined product. So it's good to see that OEMs are now looking at more sustainable solutions there, where not only are the adhesives biodegradable, but they can much more easily be separated away from the steel or the plastic, which makes the recycling and repurposing much easier. And an example of a Swiss EV company, but again, should come closer to home. We've got an expert in the room with Derek over here, where they're looking at their first choice of batteries, not just purely on performance, but how they can be reused, how they can be repurposed and ultimately recycled. So once they're no longer fit for purpose in their delivery vans, when they start to degrade, they can be refurbished and used in their less powerful, less demanding EVs, like e-scooters and the like. And even once that second life has reached its natural end, they can still be used to store energy, where the draw then back is at a much lower rate. So by hooking up to the solar panels in their plant, they still have that purpose. But again, because they've been designed with that circular PLM in place, they've been designed with recyclability in mind, and that disassembly process has been thought about from the very start, so that actually recycling, splitting those components back into their raw materials is much easier. So you've seen this multiple times now, and I think whenever I show this at the very start of a presentation, I sometimes think it doesn't quite make sense to people, and you can see puzzle books in the room. Hopefully, once you start to go through those examples, you can sort of see how it all fits into place now, and that's why I continue to be excited by this emergence of this data-driven design approach and how it can hopefully really help us accelerate that path to a sustainable future. Now, I think we've got all these things in place. I think, as we've heard multiple times today, there's a big amount of education that needs to be done, and there's a big change in mindset that needs to be done. And if we're all hungry enough to look at that in much more detail and go down this path, I do believe that we can achieve it, and that we've got everything we need there to achieve it. So I encourage everybody that is in that design and engineering environment to really take a bit more time and look at this circular life cycle management in a bit more detail, so that we can all start to consider how we use these parts and components in a much more sustainable that's it for me. Any questions?
Thanks, Paul. That was fascinating. That was really interesting. Is there any questions? Anybody? A little bit nostalgic from yourself, if that's okay.
Of course.
Just about HPC, high performance computing. Just for a better understanding of that, how does that actually work in terms of, you load what you'd like to simulate into the cloud, Paul, I'm guessing, and that goes to a wherever that might be. That's it. That them servers are based, or them. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand that a little bit better myself.
Yeah, I mean,
away from the physical aspect, as you would do on a very high performance PC that you'd have at your facility.
I mean, I think it can take many forms.
Okay.
Ultimately, again, I think if we look back, back in the day, trying to run a crash model of a car, it would take a few days to run. You'd then be digging through results for the next few days, and trying to influence the design process with a process that takes that long is really challenging. So as HPC comes along, that's made life a lot easier, and what once was the only available to the large OEMs with their big data centers, that had the luxury of being able to solve a problem many nodes and many cores. It's changing, and it's changing for everyone. We've now got mobile phones in our pockets that are much more powerful than the computers evolved. So the models are changing. It's all about being able to influence the design quickly. So we've seen a lot more complexity go into the design process, but thankfully, due to HPC, you can get the answers back quicker to still inform that design. And it can be on site. We're not talking, it doesn't need to be big numbers.
Okay.
But again, if we're looking at sustainability, how much sense does it make to have a high-performance computer sat in the office generating a lot of heat, using a lot of energy to cool it, if you're not going to make the most of that? Now, some companies are ahead of the curve. They're using better systems. They're harvesting that heat for other purposes around the building, or they're using greener solutions to cool. But that's an individual or an individual company doing that. Obviously, these large HPC cloud providers are doing things that we can only dream of. They're sinking HPC systems under the sea, where they're being naturally cooled by the core temperatures. This facility is set up in Iceland, so we get to benefit from those by uploading, downloading from the cloud. We see connectivity improving all the time. So now we're getting clients that are actually, they're looking at live results on the computer under the ocean in real time from their phone or from their laptop with very, very little latency, very little lag. They're able to manipulate that model, work on that model, and view real-time results. So the technology is there in many different ways, depending on how you want to use it.
Well, you've seen a lot of these companies, a lot of these startups now, these big data mining companies now, that are looking into companies like Hut, Clean Spark, companies like
Absolutely,
that. Fascinating, really.
Yeah.
Just wondering how that ties in as well. And maybe a good example is over the weekend as well, at the Formula One. It's the first time they went to that track. And is it a coincidence that maybe there was a lot of incidents there, perhaps? I don't know, because they weren't actually had a chance to get any physical actual data from that track, because the Friday session was cut a little bit short because of the crash, and they spoke about that, and Sunday was so exciting for many reasons, but there was a lot of incidents there. I wonder if that was due to the lack of actual, data, because they actually haven't been able to simulate that properly.
We see so much data being gathered everywhere. Particularly in Formula 1. And they've been making good use of that data for years.
Gotcha.
But you're absolutely right. There's an unknown. There's assumptions that
maybe
but they had to make certain assumptions about how they would perform that track based on using AI, machine learning, looking at how that track compares to others. But there's still to do.
Incredible. Thank you, Paul. And is there anything from yourself? or-
No, there's,
Like everybody's time.
yeah, there's one more thing to do before we have lunch, so thank you very much. That was great. And, that is my usual, nothing in life is free, right? So if you don't free lunch, I'll only allow you out of the room once you've used your phone, which you're all about anyway. You give this a scan and then complete the feedback questionnaire, please. Really useful for us to obviously let us know what you think of this event, but also give us an idea of the sort of subjects you want to hear about in the future. So if you could all give that a quick scan, fill it in, and then please help yourself to some food and that. But yeah, hope you found it interesting day. Thank you very much to Hexagon for hosting us. It was excellent. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.